Hello, everyone. Welcome back to United We Tech, the chat interview series that we on the Data Platform Women in Tech group have been doing with some amazing women data technologists. We were on a short break and we have resumed our interviews again. Our guest today is Amy Abel, and we are going to talk to her on her experiences with SQL Server 2022. Before that, a round of introductions. I'm going to start with me. My name is Mala. I'm a data engineer and I live in Raleigh, North Carolina. And I've been leading the Data Platform Women in Tech group since 2020, co-leading the Data Platform Women in Tech group since 2020. Over to Leslie now.
My name's Leslie Andrews. I'm in Albuquerque, New Mexico. I am a consultant for Microsoft Gold Partner. I do data engineering as well. And I've been working with Mala for the past couple of years on the Women in Tech platform. And we're excited to get started doing the chats again. And welcome to our newest member, Josephine.
Yes, thank you. So hi, I'm Josephine Bush, and I'm a data platform MVP and sort of like DBA slash engineer slash like whatever comes up at work, I guess, right? So yeah, so I'm happy to be part of WIT and happy to help out however I can.
Awesome. And our guest of honor today, Amy.
Hi, I'm really excited to be here. My name is Amy Abel. I'm from Salt Lake City, Utah. I work for a company called Advanced MD. We do medical software. We're owned by Global Payments. I've been there for 5 years, and I am a database reliability engineer slash DBA, senior DBA, and I'm really happy to be here.
That's exciting. So what is the favorite thing you like to do at work? Like the things that you get to do, what's your favorite one?
My favorite thing is anything to do with SQL Server. I like performance tuning. I like looking at any type of, AWS cost saving initiatives, optimizing our AWS bill or anything like that comes to mind is very exciting. I also like to train and talk about best practices within the company. So I really like to mentor and train people.
Hallelujah for best practices.
Yeah.
Do you actually use them or you just talk about them?
Yeah.
Oh, no, I am a very big advocate on best practices. And I think that it's something that not a lot of people keep in mind when they're reading, writing, or even creating new features. And so I think that knowledge is power. And if we can empower people to write good code and use those good practices, then I think that it makes my job a lot easier.
Mm-hmm. I fully agree. Totally agree. What would you have done if you didn't end up being a DBRE?
So originally I went to school to be a full stack developer. I got my degree in computer science.
Mm-hmm.
And I was supposed to be a full stack developer and write C# code. And I did that, but I found that I got instant gratification by working with the database. And I don't know what it is, but anytime I execute a query and I see immediate result, I get excited, right? And then also the database side just really interests me more than I would about writing code. I don't know about you guys, but sometimes when you're writing code, it takes weeks and weeks to develop something. Within the database, I feel like I feel like it's more intuitive for me.
Mm-hmm. Josephine, do you have anything for Amy before we
It's
start?
funny that you say that. I just want to say real quick.
Oh, yeah.
So I went to school expecting to be a database person. So when I was in college, and when we did the database class, I got third normal form like that. Like that was just intuitive to me. It was that it was incredulous that these people didn't get that. Like how could you not get that? And then I was a developer for like 5 years. I wrote Delphi code and did desktop applications. And while I did build a database for my application that was in perfect third normal form, and it lasted for years in that format, it wasn't until after I left the court that I really got into the data side of it and databases and not the coding side.
Mhm.
So you like I'm assuming that you just really like and prefer the data side than you do the coding side, or which one's your favorite?
Um, I like both. The other day I got to write like a Python script. I was like, oh, I feel so codey and technical today. I'm like, so I really am enjoying coding data with Python because that gets me the best of both worlds.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I hate coding personally. So I've avoided Python like the plague. I do all kinds of hard things, but I just sort of avoid it. A coworker of mine's like, why don't you just learn some Python? I'm like, because I just do everything else. Anything database, right? Database, yeah. Yeah, funny thing, Amy, because I worked for a company that's now owned by Global Payments. At the time, it wasn't owned by that, which I thought was kind of funny, the Global Payments connection. But so I guess I was thinking a question wise. I know you and I've talked offline about this, and I'm curious to hear your thoughts on the SQL Server 2022, like the issues you've had around that, because I know you had some pains, and I'm just
We are all interested in hearing that.
yeah, the pain. We want to hear about your pain. Well, that sounds a little sadistic. We're like, ooh, okay, to help others.
So you deal with
Yes.
trauma by discussing it and getting it
Yes,
out.
exactly.
So,
Yes, we're gonna heal your trauma.
Yeah, that's a good point. So, a little background is that I work for a medical software company, and what we do is very critical. It's because our patients and our doctors rely on us to be stable. We do telemed visits, doctor notes, medications, anything under the sun. We even do stuff with payments, credit cards, things like that. And so our stability is really needed. And the interesting thing is that SQL 2022 was very enticing because they had all of these new features. They had the plan sensitive, the PSP, the plant sensitive plan optimization. They had the accelerated database recovery. They even were supposed to help with compression with cost, which they have. There's a lot of good things about SQL 2022, but the main reasons why we were wanting it was because of all the new features that were there. One recommendation that I would make for anybody that's updating to SQL 2022 is I got this book from Bob Ward at SQL Pass. I read a few pages. I'm not going to lie. I'm going to admit this. I read a few pages and then I completely forgot that I owned it. But we did a lot of testing and a lot of things to upgrade to SQL 2022. And I ended up reading the book twice after to understand what the differences were within the engine, what the differences were within the database configurations, and what had changed, because it was night and day difference in a lot of our different servers. So just to give you an idea, I do manage with my team about over 100 clusters. And we have a very large environment. Some of our customers are, their workflows are going to be different based on their data. And so what I started seeing is that we had a lot of stolen buffer. And the stolen buffer was astronomical. It was insane. We started seeing memory issues, and it wasn't completely all across the board. It was onesies and twosies with some of the memory grant issues. We seen memory issues across the board, though. Stolen buffer across the board. Interesting thing, people love lock pages in memory. We have had to turn it off. Lock pages in memory does not do well with SQL 2022. And, our environment is going to be different because of the way that we do transactions, the way that we read data, the way that we use our data is going to be different than, somebody that has different types of data, different types of companies. I'm not going to speak for everyone, but this has been my experience. Is one, we've had to turn off the PSP. It's not been something that we've been able to utilize. We've loved
We turned
the
off
data.
PSP too, where I am.
Yep, we've had to turn that off. There's 3 trace flags that we've had to turn on, and one of them is not even blogged about, talked about. I can't even Google it. But it's something I am going to blog on because I'm starting a blog, and I did my first blog actually on my blogging site. But these are things I want to talk about because of the fact that it was a huge difference in SQL 2022 to SQL 2019. The other thing that I've noticed is that back in the day, you know, SQL Server 2017, you know, or 14, or, you know, even 19, database configuration scope that you can change on the database would turn certain things off, and it would actually make a difference. We noticed that no matter what, things that we turned off did not make a difference. We had to literally go for trace flags and changes outside of the database configuration. So that's something I also intend to talk about without getting too far into the weeds. But if you are going to switch to SQL 2022, it's not a bad thing. It's that you have to take extra precautions. One, you should be tuning your code and removing your recompiles. If you have ad hoc workloads and you have a lot of them, you are going to have some major problems because of the fact that it deals with it differently with the ad hoc workloads. And you also want to make sure that you do not have that flag turned on, optimized for workloads within the database configurations. Your PSP, I would say that one's not quite there yet. They also changed buffer pull scans and how that is handled within SQL 2022. So you'll see a difference within the buffer pull and the memory based on SQL 2022. But the good thing about SQL 2022 is that we were able to save money on our backups because of the compression. And in the past, when we did compression, it would add a ton of overhead and CPU to our SQL servers. And they have managed to help that. So it's not complete, you know, there's not a lot of issues. It's just a lot of things that nobody's really talking about because I don't know if nobody's blogging about them or if they haven't had the problems. I just don't know yet. The other thing that we've noticed is that we had an issue with redo queue.
With what?
Redo queue.
Okay.
So
Redo queue.
yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
And the interesting thing is that the redo queue was introduced in, the problem was introduced in 2019.
Yeah.
Well, it accelerated that issue in 2022. It wasn't fixed until CU 12.
Okay.
So yeah,
So
we
it's
were
fixed now?
Yep, CU 12. And
Yeah.
I guess they just released that there's a CU 13, and I haven't really gone into depth about what CU 13 would encompass. But my next thing that I'd really like to vlog about is Query Store. Because I am finding some really interesting things with Query Store. And I don't know about you guys, or if you have to constantly tune your stored procedures because, you know, you do a lot of transactions or you add features or whatnot. But one thing I've noticed about Query Store is that it saves the plans, right? Well, the interesting thing about saving plans, like this happened the other day, it was blowing my mind. Okay, a join is missing on a stored procedure for a primary key that would make your search a lot faster. It needs to be there. I go and change it. A couple of days later, I go and look or whatever, because I've been dealing with this problem for on and off or whatever. Go and check it. And the plan says that the join is not there. I go back to the stored procedure. I look at the stored procedure, the join is there.
Hmm.
Go and clear the plan cache, check again, the join is gone. It's doing 4 million reads when it should only do 20. Go back, clear the cache, look at the query plan, everything looks like it's gone. Join is gone again. So it's an interesting thing because with the development cycles and when you're working with stored procedures, when you're releasing during the day, you want to have your stored procedures say create or alter, right? You don't want to say drop and alter because that's the SQL 2019, SQL 2022 thing, right? You want to do create or alter because that's just the way to prevent interruption. Well, you know what? When you're doing a create or alter, you are keeping the same plan for that stored procedure that you just changed. And it's keeping the same performance, even though you made performance changes to that query. So the interesting thing is like, we also don't want to change it to drop and create because that would ultimately drop the plan, right? So it's an interesting thing because we've been working on this to come up with.
But if you change the query, it's supposed to create a new plan for it.
Yeah, it does create a new plan. But the interesting thing is it creates another plan, but it keeps the old plan too.
Okay.
This is, yeah, this is so interesting. And I have not seen anybody talk about this. I mean, I've not seen anybody blog about this. So I've been working the last couple of days about blogging this and blogging about this, but I've had to create a database. I've had to, use AdventureWorks. I've had to do this because I don't want to expose, my company's schema, my company's data, but I also have to reproduce this issue.
The prep work for demos or blogs is insane. People just don't understand how much
So Amy, you said it keeps the old plan too. Does it use it? I mean, it should go after some time by itself because it's not used.
It does use the plan. It uses both the plans, which is really interesting because if you look in Query Store, you're like, why is it using the old plan? Well, when you go in to look at the cache plan, right? Usually you can look up by stored procedure. Like,
right.
You can look it up and say stored procedure. Well, what was found is that it's individual statements within the stored procedure that get saved to Query Store.
Okay.
Yeah. So you have to go in and you have to drop that statement or clear out that statement that was saved to Query Store if you didn't want to do a drop and create instead of a create and alter. So it is a ghost and it just keeps on coming back. So yesterday I was dealing with this and I was looking at this and I was getting on my blog, but I have to reproduce it. But Leslie, you're right. It's the time that it takes you have to spin up a VM or, build a server. And then you have to look at your, SQL licensing. You have to look at, all of the different things. And you have to do a database. And
you have to have a database with data in it. And stored procedures.
So I use Docker all the time now for doing like a SQL server because I'm so glad I don't have to deal with SQL Server anymore because I have Azure SQL and Azure PG only. But like, does Docker have a 2022 version? I don't even know. Does anybody know?
I think it does.
I have 2019 now, so.
Oh, well, when I was installing SQL last night on my VM, I think I did see a option for Docker 2022, but I could be mistaken because they had three options. They had Docker, Azure, and then, the normal basic stuff. Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
So are you on Azure, Amy? Are you on Azure SQL or on-prem or?
We are 100% in the cloud in AWS.
Okay.
And so everything is 100% in the cloud. It's interesting though, because I think being in the cloud presents its own issues. The interesting thing between back in the day versus now, because back in the day, everybody was on-prem, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you would get a call as a DBA and say, hey, will you go grow the disk? We're running out of space, or,
Mm-hmm.
you know, we're having performance issues. We don't want to upsize this server.
Mm-hmm.
Now it's like, well, let's just go ahead and upsize until we fix the problems. And
Yeah.
For sure.
yeah,
Yeah, sure.
Well, that was fascinating. Thanks for talking with us. I learned a lot.
Right.
Yeah, me
Well,
too.
I'll look
Thanks.
out for it because we've also upgraded to 2022, although we are an on-prem environment, a big environment, and the 2022 stuff is not in the cloud yet. We have some stuff in AWS, but what's in 2022 is on-prem. But very good to know. Thank you.
Yeah, for sure. I'll definitely be finishing up that query store blog soon. I'm just trying to reproduce every little thing, and it
Mhm.
becomes very hard sometimes.
Mhm.
But yeah, if you're moving to 2022, I would definitely prepare with looking at your code, looking at your recompiles, your query hints,
Mhm.
you know, and
What
then
sort of
load
query
testing.
hints were problematic for you other than
Oh,
recompile?
yeah, so option recompile, there were some really interesting ones, even though they're not used a lot, even if they're used a little bit, like keep fix plan.
We don't use that much.
We had a monitoring tool that we were using, and they had a hint in their code, and it said keep fixed plan,
Oh my.
something like that.
Mhm.
And that was blowing up so that we had to turn our monitoring services off for a while. Because it just was not driving well with SQL 2022. Yeah.
Mm.
Okay. Thankfully, that's not one we use much.
Have you had any issues with memory grants since you've been on 2022 at all?
Not yet. Not that I know of. This PSP issue we had, PSP and query store, but that's a fixable thing. But because we use a lot of custom DMB queries with the query store stuff, we don't have time to fix it, and we turned PSP off. It wasn't giving much gains anyway, so I don't think the feature is quite there yet, which you rightly said some time ago.
Mm.
I think they've started off well on it. I think the gains are a little away.
Yeah, one thing I've noticed since SQL 2019 and memory grants. So I'm very passionate about memory grants. I can talk about memory grants all day, but I'll make it very short. One thing that I've noticed in the recent versions for SQL 2019 and SQL 2022 is that they wanted to prevent spill from tempdb, right? So what they did is they did memory grants and adaptive memory grants and different types of things that were changed. Well, what happens is the first time that the query runs, it will over grant memory. So let's say that you have a very simple query and it's like, okay, well, it's probably going to take 200 megs to run this query. Well, with an option recompile on there, this is the reason why it's a bad issue within 22, is that the second time it will readjust based on the second run. And you can find that in your plan when you're looking at the options and you go into, like when you're running the query and you're looking at your query plan within, your plan explorer. It will say memory was adjusted or something like that. And the reason why they do that is so that they do that to prevent, my personal opinion is to prevent from spilling to tempdb. Well, if it's granting, let's say 200 megs and it only needs like 12 KB and it's running the recompile, it's almost like it's running the first time every time it's ran. And so it will keep on asking for an excessive amount of memory instead of readjusting to what the memory is, what memory it needs. So that's another reason why you want to remove those recompiles, because you would want the SQL server to do more work. However, the issue with that is that people add recompiles to remove parameter sniffing.
Right.
So it's like you've got to pick which one is better because, you know, do you want parameter sniffing, which they have added, you know, some optimization for parameter sniffing, obviously, but
Right.
it's very interesting because you kind of got to pick if it's really happening or how you can solve that problem. So memory grants is another thing that I'm definitely highly involved in talking about, presenting about, blogging about, and educating people about, because people are used to talking about high reads.
Uh-huh.
They're used to talking about, you know, duration.
Uh-huh.
They're used to looking at CPU. But when your CPU is only 20% on a SQL server with, you know, 32 cores or even 16 cores, and then you're not noticing any problems, it's probably because you're not looking at the granted memory.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I love all these things within SQL Server. SQL Server just fascinates me.
Mm-hmm.
So you said that you're gonna present on this. Did you submit to Summit?
I submitted on this exact topic because I am so passionate.
Awesome.
If I get selected for this one talk and this one talk only to present on memory grants, I will be thrilled because this is the one topic that I'd love to talk about.
Great. I hope it gets picked.
I hope you do.
Yeah.
Hope you get selected on this. Have you
I
been
hope so
talking
too.
to user groups and other places on it?
So I did speak at the SQL Saturday. I did not submit for the memory grants because it was a submit, and then I had a very short time to prepare to present. So I did it on split brain, which is another passionate subject of mine because not a lot of DBAs know what that means, or, you know, people that work within the infrastructure, especially when they go to AWS, they just think that it's not a possibility for them to get a split brain scenario. So I presented on split brain, and I've talked a little bit about memory grants.
You should submit to 8 KB.
What's that?
8
8
KB is a
KB.
virtual conference.
Oh, 8KB. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
This would be
Yeah,
a
I think you could
great
submit to
topic
the
for
end of the
that.
month
Yeah.
maybe, because you'd be really
Yes.
great with the memory
Yeah.
grant thing and
Yeah.
8KB. That's a really good
Absolutely.
idea, Mala. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
We
Like,
like
look it up.
to find female speakers for them when we can. So that's part of the goal with doing this, is finding
Yes.
women who can speak to advanced topics, and
That's definitely one. Very technical. We
because
like
we're
it.
always
Yeah,
fighting
very
the
good.
line
Yeah.
that women
Yeah,
aren't
the call for
technical
I'll send you
enough.
the call for speakers, Amy. It closes on May 31st. I did it last year, and I used to think, oh, I can't, my thing is not really advanced enough. But it got selected, and I was no harder than any other online conference I did. So I'll send you a link.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, I would definitely love to submit for that. It's a topic that a lot of people need to know about, and I think that that's another one I submitted for pass. Those are the two that I was the most passionate about, but definitely memory grants is the most. But I will look at that and submit and see if I get selected, because that sounds really cool.
It is.
Well,
Fingers
your
crossed for
passion
you. That'd be
shows through,
fantastic.
It
your
is a
passion
very cool
shows through
conference.
your pain. So all the pain, is covered over by all your passion, I can see,
Yes, there you go. Well, thanks so much for joining us today. I've had a great time talking with you.
Same
Yeah, it
here.
was awesome.
Thank you for the very informative session.
Yeah.
Thanks guys for having me. I appreciate it.
All right.